What's good, YouTube? It's me, your boy Squiddy, back in another Squiddy. Centurions! They're finally being released today in the side set Valiant Smashers, and this deck's actually a lot of fun. There are a lot of different ways to play this deck because the core engine is very, very tiny. So I thought I'd demonstrate, or show you guys rather, a couple of decks versions that you can definitely experiment with to discover, what might be the best version for this current metagame and what might work most effectively in terms of making the deck super good, explosive, and also very, very good in terms of follow-up. Without further ado, let's dive into the first and foremost one is the pure Centurion deck. So this is just leveraging the core component of the Centurions with a bunch of non-engine cards, hand traps, whatever the heck you need to stop your opponent from playing. Now, for those of you guys that don't actually know what these cards do, I have actually made another Squiddio with some basic combos demonstrating the one card combo, or the 1.5 card combo rather. But I also will probably make some more content to demonstrate to you guys how to play the deck in depth. But for the purpose of this video, we'll just talk about the builds. So obviously the core engine, 3 Primera, this is the Stratos to search for your any Centurion card. We have 3 Trudea, which is the one that places the Primera into your spell and trap zone upon normal summon. And then we have 2 M at 6. Unfortunately, we do have to play 2 in this build in particular because I am wanting to test Pot of Desires. Now, obviously, if you want to forego Pot of Desires, you could probably get away with 1 M at 6 because it is a bit of a brick, but it does have some marginal utility being in your hand to play around potentially things like Infinite Impermanence or whatever the heck might affect a monster during your opponent's turn. And then hand traps, we get to play a lot of non-engine, all the best ones. Drone Lockbird, Effect Veiler, Nibiru, Ash Blossom, and oh, these are kind of out of order. But we're also choosing to play Fenrir because I think this is a decently good card in a deck like this where you're very reliant on your normal summon. And, if your opponent stops you with like an Infinite Impermanence or something, it kind of feels bad, no matter how much power you have in your hand in terms of non-engine. So having cards like Fenrir actually kind of seals that gap a little bit in terms of grind game. You have an extra body on the board that applies some pressure. Even when you brick, which happens in this deck sometimes because you do not open your starters, then you do have the Fenrir at least to keep you company with a plethora of other cozy hand traps to keep your opponent at bay. And then we're obviously maxing out on Emblema of Oath. This is one of the main starters for the Centurion engine as well without using your normal summon. 1 Faith for follow-up that you can search off of Primera during your opponent's turn. 3 stand-up Centurion, obviously very, very standard with the terraforming. 3 tactics, just in case you get a hand trap, because, hand traps are flying around quite commonly, and this does help you actually break boards as well. So it's definitely something to consider playing. The Desires, I feel like in this deck, it's a lot like pure Zodiac, and you're just able to draw a lot of cards. So it's really helpful to play this. You can also choose to play Pot of Prosperity if you are particularly daring. Unfortunately, this does kind of clash with the Centurion Legatia, which says during the turn that you summon it, you can actually draw 1 card. Unfortunately, when you do activate Prosperity, that means you will not be able to use Legatia or vice versa because you can't draw on the turn that you activate it. And of course, fairly generic side deck. You do want to test out Crossout Designator, I think, because it's nice that we can push through the Calamity Lock. Of course, this is one of the main selling points of the deck is that off 1.5 cards, you can actually establish a Hot Red Dragon Archfiend King Calamity during your opponent's turn, effectively locking them out from playing, which is very, very easily made using Crimson Dragon plus Legatia. Now, pushing that through, obviously going first is very, very important, so having Cross Designator could potentially be an option there, and the rest of the stuff is fairly standard. Could maybe fit in 1 Zeus as well, just for the Triple Taxis talent. Now, the reason why we're playing Centurion Phalanx over Centurion Truth, which is the counter trap card, is because the Truth is kind of counterintuitive. You actually have to send a face-up monster card from your spell and trap zone to the graveyard, which means that during your initial 1.5 card setup, you generally only have Trudea plus Primera on the field to special summon back during your opponent's turn in order to make your consecutive Crimson Dragon. But unfortunately, sending either one of them off of Truth Centurion makes it so that we're not going to have enough bodies to actually link off into the Crimson Dragon, or Synchro rather. So that means that this is just completely counterintuitive, I think, to what the deck wants to accomplish. And I feel like having cards like Centurion Phalanx already is disruption in the form of the trap. That also has an amazing pseudo effect to resurrect Legatia, allowing you to actually draw a card, because this is only when he's summoned, not just Synchro summoned. So yeah, that's a pure deck. Moving on, next we have the HORUS build. This is a very popularized version that was seen prominently in a lot of OCG tournaments. The nice thing about the HORUS, well, the main selling point is the fact that the HORUS cards are actually level 8s, which means that you can easily have a level 8 body to synchro off with Primera to go into Legatia, right? And the other selling point about this is the fact that you can make powerful rank 8s before you even start your play, right? You can go into things like the number 90 Galaxy Eyes Photon Lord, or potentially Hope Harbinger to set up a bigger lock. And you can also dig for your engine using Zombie Vampire by milling 4, because a lot of the times this deck does tend to brick when you don't see the actual engine. So seeing any HORUS, for example, Mseti, will allow you to dig 4 cards deeper to try and hit a Primera or a Trudea, and then continue your Centurion combo. So it's just like nice little dual utility there for the HORUS cards. Now, you do have some flexibility. This deck is a little bit big. It's 42, but it should definitely be closer to 40. I'm sure there are a lot of things you can cut. But for the purpose of demonstrating, you know, what is possible with this deck, I tried to make it as thick as possible. So you do see that we are playing Dumatef as well as Mseti and Happy. It just allows you to have more options. I think having dual utility in the triple Horus names allows you to first make a potentially a Photon Lord, and then on the consecutive with the third name, you can actually make the Gatia with the Primera, right? So it just gives you an extra body to synchro with, so you don't actually have to rely on the M at 6. For example, sometimes you might not want to actually discard a card to set up the M at 6 with stand-up Centurion. So when you have access to this third Horus, that means that you don't even have to discard the card to send Emmet. Instead, you could just use a third Horus body to go into the Legatia. So very, very nice utility there. Obviously, we do have to cut down on some hand traps in order to make these guys fit. And I've seen OCG play anywhere from double King Sarcophagus to 1 to even triple King Sarcophagus, because it's technically a starter if you're trying to send a card and then make the Zombie Vampire and try and dig into your Centurion pieces. So that's definitely something you can do. I think the other nice thing about this deck is the fact that you get big bodies on board. You know, you can have Mseti, you can kind of duck it behind the rest of your plays, just having like a big body plus a bunch of hand traps. Sometimes that's even decently good until you actually see your Centurion engine, right? And it also gives you a lot more extenders. If your opponent just like hand traps one of your Primeras or Crudeas, and we have Horus in our hand, we can just still go into the Legatia, or we can just go into a rank 8, so we can kind of further our plays there. I think this might be honestly the most popular version of the deck because of how synergistic the level 8 bodies are, and on top of the Horus cards just being decently good to establish pressure on their own. So yeah, definitely experiment with this one as well, and let me know your guys' thoughts on what you think about Horus engine as a whole. The next build that we should take a look at is the Super Heavy Samurai build. This was also fairly popular in the OCG when the deck was first introduced. And in our last video, we kind of demonstrated on how the Super Heavy Samurai engine can be very, very nice in tandem with the Centurion stuff. Well, first and foremost, obviously, taking advantage of Wakaushi allows us to make powerful cards like Baron de Fleur before even starting our play, right? So that just allows us to have an Omni Negate to protect the rest of our Centurion combo. Obviously, you do need access to the Motorbike in order to make this happen, but in the times that we don't have Motorbike, we can still make powerful rank 8 synchros, or level 8 rather. And on top of all that, there's actually a level 4 XYZ monster that just came out in Nagov called Infernal Flame Banshee, who's a generic rank 4 that says you can detach material from this card, take one Pyro monster from your deck, and either add it to your hand or send it in the graveyard, which is very, very important because Trudea is actually a Pyro monster, meaning that anytime we have Wakaushi or access to a rank 4, we can instantly search for our combo starter in the form of Centurion Trudea. It's like an in-engine searcher, right? So it's really nice that Wakaushi instantly becomes engine in tandem with Infernal Flame Banshee, or it becomes an Omni Negate, which is very, very nice. And on top of all of that, you do have options to kind of go directly into your level 12 synchro with cards like Tilting Entrainment, which says if this card is synchro summoned, you can special summon a level 4 or lower pendulum monster from your hand or face-up extra deck, meaning we can resurrect that same Wakaushi, and with the level 8 body plus the Wakaushi, we can instantly go into a level 12, aka Centurion Legatia, which is a generic synchro 12, right? To draw a card and hopefully start our Centurion plays that way, seeing more engine, or having a 3500 body just on the board. It's very, very nice because you do get to play a lot of engine, non-engine again, but unfortunately you do have to compromise by playing some of the bad non-engine, so cards like Ghost Mourner, or potentially, I guess Droll would actually be a better fit in this. So yeah, we should definitely play Droll. I guess probably should add this. So yeah, I'd probably play Droll over Ghost Mourner, to be honest, but I think, you know, you do have to compromise by playing a lot of monster cards, because like these spell cards just make Wakaushi dead. You can't really play anything like Imperm, because then you start your turn and you look at your hand, you have Super Heavy Samurai, you can't really do anything. The other kind of caveat with this deck in particular is the fact that you do have to play a lot of bricks. So Big Monk Benkei, you know, Sogai Booster, maybe even Scales. These cards are all bricks that we effectively do not want to see at any point in our hand. We only really want to see Motorbike as well as Wakaushi. The other annoying part is that Wakaushi and the Super Heavy Samurai cards do play heavy in their Droll and Lockbird. So we get Drolled, that means we're not going to be able to resolve Legatea, which is not the worst thing in the world, but it can be potentially harmful if we do want to start our plays with Infernal Flame Banshee and we do get Drolled on the either the Motorbike or the Big Benkei ad. That means that we're not going to be able to dig for our Centurion monsters. So that's just one thing to be aware of. But I think this deck is very, very explosive because the Super Heavy Samurai cards are just amazing extenders as well as starters. So that in their own utility definitely has a lot of flexibility. So yeah, definitely give this one a try. We did a demonstration in this video as well about how this combo works, so definitely check out the description below for that. And then the last build of Centurion that I want to talk to you guys about today is none other than BYSTIAL Centurion. Now, how this works specifically is the fact that Lubellion is actually a level 8, meaning that anytime we have Lubellion access, it's a free body that allows us to establish Branded Regained on the board, as well as synchro off with the Primera to go into Legatea. So I was just, you know, kind of digging off the card pool to see if there are generic level 8s that are just good extenders, right? And, you know, Lubellion happens to be level 8, so it pairs very well. The other nice thing is the fact that the rest of BYSTIALs are level 6, so we can easily go into powerful synchros like Baron de Fleur, Fleur, or potentially even BYSTIAL Dissipator to just make a huge, whopping, annoying board that's really hard for a lot of decks to deal with. Now, the other nice thing is Branded Regained in the mid-range grind game is just amazing. You know, being able to recur Magnemite over and over and over again, as well as playing cards like Druisworm that are effective against decks like Unchained, you know, just getting rid of problematic monsters. And this deck has a lot of non-engine space, so we can actually accommodate by also playing a bunch of hand traps, as you've seen in the other builds already, on top of having the BYSTIAL. So I think that's just really, really nice interaction there. And then, yeah, it's just fairly standard. You know, the BYSTIALs are just generically good extender monsters on their own. Just playing on by themselves, I think, is still pretty good. You could potentially make an argument to playing some of the rank 6s, you know, cards like Wallow potentially, and maybe, I guess Beatrice doesn't really fit in the deck like this because we can't really do anything in the graveyard. But again, you could play Seals as well, Heretic Seal, just like leveraging these big bodies and then using them to kind of control the game. Like a hand with like some BYSTIALs, like a Magnemite plus some hand traps, at least you're going to be able to survive for like a turn or two before finally seeing your Centur-Ion engine in the case that you do break. And then in the case that you don't break and you're able to play, you're just able to establish the Lubellion, get the Branded Regain on the board, synchro off either into Baron de Fleur or Legatea, and then have the Regain just for infinite follow-up on top of the Primera on their turn. So the Primera comes back, and then we're able to search a copy of Trudea to follow up, or stand up Centurion if you decide you do want to play it, because that card is actually generically good follow-up that you can search on their turn with the Primera effects. So yeah, it's just like you have a lot of options in a deck like this that just has insane starters as well as insane recursion and a grind game. But the only trade-off I think about Centurions as a whole is the fact that they are quite weak in the core engine to one-card stoppers, like any hand trap, like an Imperm, Ghost Ogre, Cosmic Cyclone, Veiler, you name it. Like these cards will actually hurt on a Primera or Trudea normal summon, which is why we definitely have to pad for that by playing a lot of hand traps and board breakers, and B, a subterranean, like a secondary engine that allows you to still stay in the game and apply pressure anytime that your core starter is stopped. So like if we get Primera Imperm and we have like a Lubellion, we can just go into Magnemite effect, then just make a Baron de Fleur, and then we still have like a lot of plays. Or we could just like make the Magnemite into the Lubellion and then go into Legatea, draw a card, and then end phase establish the Primera on their turn, special summon for more follow-up. So that just kind of like adds to the pressure of the board, as well as it is fail-safe anytime that you do get hand trapped in a deck like this that's just like very pure zoo-esque, that you just have to have another layer in order to keep playing. So yeah, those are the builds I want to demonstrate to you guys today. If you have any other builds that we're not aware of, or any thoughts about this deck as a whole, do you guys think this deck will actually be good, or is it a deck that's going to kind of flop and fall to tier 2, tier 3 level like it did in the OCG? Let us know in the comments below. As always, definitely subscribe so we can continue bringing you guys awesome videos. Other than that, thanks a lot for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.